I'm Ferrin Peterson, here today with Hall of Fame jockey Steve Cauthen at Keeneland Racecourse. Thank you to Keeneland for letting us use the Lafayette Room. Steve was a Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year in 1977. He is in both the United States Horse Racing Hall of Fame and the British Racing Hall of Fame. He is the only jockey to have won both the Kentucky Derby and the Epsom Derby, which is Europe's equivalent of the Kentucky Derby. He's won 2 Triple Crowns, the United States Triple Crown and the England Fillies Triple Crown. And he has many other accolades, but we will stop there.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Boundless podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ferrin Peterson, a professional jockey and veterinarian in Lexington, Kentucky. We are here to learn from stories of resilience, risk-taking, and perseverance. Steve, I know your father, Tex Cauthen, taught you to ride, although he was not a jockey himself. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, my dad was from Southwest Texas. He was born in a town called Muleshoe, which was, I think there was about 100 people that lived there. And he was raised in Sweetwater. And so he was, he was the old West, kind of, small farm and raised on a farm. And, he broke horses when he was 12 and 13 at some farm down in Texas, and then went to the racetrack when he was pretty young, like 16 or so, and eventually became a blacksmith. So he wanted to be a jockey, but he was obviously always going to be too big. So when I came to him at 12 years old and said, I want to be a jockey, he said, well, I'll do everything I can to help you. He said, but, and what I can't help you with, I'll try to get somebody that I, believe knows what they're doing, and they'll teach you. But he was a great horseman. He was an all-around horseman, and he loved, the game. And so I think he was thrilled when he heard that I wanted to be a jockey. My mom was not so much, she was a little less inspired by my choice. But, me and my dad were really close, and thankfully, he was, kind of my right-hand guy as I was proceeding to try to learn to be, to ride, racehorses, and just kind of, made me a better horseman all around, really.
And your dad is in the Hall of Fame, correct?
And my dad's in the Horseshoeing Hall of Fame, yeah, exactly. So.
And then he raised you around horses. You learned all the grunt work and
yeah, I was mucking out stalls when I was 5, so. I, had to start, once I started school, I had to go clean them before I went to school or after when I got back. So I usually tried to do it before because I wanted to play when I got done, because my buddies would come around, we'd play basketball. But, it was, it was a great childhood. I showed 4-H, I showed Western, but, and really, to be quite honest, I was small, but I was very strong, and I always kind of thought of myself as being a football player, because I love football. I like the contact of it and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty fast, and I was a big Johnny Unitas fan, so I thought, someday, maybe I'll be I could, of course, I didn't realize I wasn't going to keep growing. I played on the 7th grade Pee Wee football league, and after that year of running for my life and nearly getting killed by these huge guys. I decided it was time to think of something else. And then I read the book Eddie Arcaro written, I Ride to Win, and it was like just twigged something in my brain that I know what I want to do now. And so from that point on, at the age of 12, I was pursuing becoming a jockey.
And
I was lucky enough to had been around it, so I was, in a good situation to move forward. My dad was willing to help me, yeah.
Mm-hmm. He'd get you on hay bales with a saddle and teach you. And
yeah, I can't remember who. That might have been my idea, just because I wanted to practice. But I'd get 2 or 3 hay bales stacked up, and I'd tie some reins to the. The
hay bale in front.
The wood, or whatever. We had some crossbar things, and I'd just be riding away and trying to hit in the same, make sure I was hitting the horse in the same spot, obviously not in the flank, like where it would be their hip, and and just kind of learning rhythm, and just as as a young person, you can imagine yeah, as far as I was concerned, I was in a race. I was head and head with Cordero down the stretch.
They move still as a team to the backstretch. Seattle slow along the rail, affirmed on the outside.
It was a cool thing to have all that there for me to where I could do that. And being the kind of focused individual I was, that's what I did. I mean, when I had spare time, from that point on, most guys would be out playing basketball or whatever after school. I'd be up in the rafters, working on my, my stick, action. And, obviously 2 summers I broke horses at a local farm, which was a great experience. They taught me a lot more than I taught them, but it was, I really learned how to think like a horse, try to encourage a horse to want to do what I wanted him to do instead of trying to make him do what I wanted him to do. And, really that's kind of been how I've always tried to do it. It just seems like it's a lot easier if you can entice somebody to say, this is a great idea,
with
or
you.
think it's their idea. What the heck? I don't
Right,
care.
make it their idea.
Make it their idea, but just, get them to somehow figure out that it's not bad to do this. We can do this.
Well, I'd always really liked how your dad taught you, even though he wasn't a jockey, because my dad taught me to pole vault, and he was never a pole vaulter.
All right.
But he did track, and he did
Right.
triple jump, and he always admired the pole vaulters. So
Right.
same thing. He
Yeah.
thought, I'm going to make my daughters pole vaulters, and coached me. And he was a great coach without having done it himself.
I mean, that I can say is, like you said, it's always good to have somebody in your corner like that whatever you're trying to do, they're going to figure out a way to help you do it. So it was,
Who was your role model early on as a jockey?
Probably Braulio Baeza.
Third, but jockey Braulio Baeza urging him on. At the top of the stretch, Baeza calls for a burst of speed, and he gets it.
Because he was a tall guy, and I was kind of, even though I was only 5'1" at the time, I was tall.
You're so tall.
I was skinny, but I could see myself. I envisioned myself eventually being something more like him, and kind of, like sitting straight up in the saddle, and and obviously his low,
Still.
the way he was on the horse, he stayed still and was low, and kept his back, really good and straight, and it was, wind, because my dad was all about wind resistance,
The aerodynamics.
aerodynamics of it all, and so yeah, that was probably who I first. But then as you go along, of course, I was lucky enough to ride with some of the greatest riders that ever lived, and Cordero and Turcotte and Velasquez and Pinkai and Shoemaker. I watched them all, and you pick up what you think you can use, and stuff. Some things they could do didn't really work for me, and so I didn't try to do everything they did. I just tried to do things that made sense to me, that worked for me. So
Chris
I did
McCarran,
that all my whole career, in Europe as well.
always learning from others.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris McCarran has also told me about Braulio's style, and he said when you'd be next to him in a race, you couldn't tell when he was going to ask his horse to go, which, you're watching your competition thinking, when are they going? He'd just be so still, and they couldn't see him give that cue.
I kind of did that to Georgie down the backside on the Affirmed and the Belmont.
You made him move early?
No, I didn't. I was like, I was making him wait to figure out when I was gonna make my move, But because I think, it's like, well, I knew he didn't really want to go, so it's like, and then that's why we ended up going 6 furlongs in 1:14, in the Belmont.
3/4, however, went in 1:14. The pace is still slow.
So I must have learned that from Braulio
Okay.
without realizing it.
Yeah. How old were you when you rode your first race?
I was 16 and 12 days. Yeah.
Was the cutoff 16? So you had
Back
to wait?
then it was 16. I don't know what it is. Is it?
It might be 18 now.
Is it now 18? But anyway, back then you could get your license when you were 16. And when I was 16, I looked like I was 10.
16-year-old apprentice who looks like his biggest concern should be a date for the junior prom, not riding million-dollar horses in big races.
So I went to the jockeys, to try to get my license, because you had to sit in front of the state steward, who was Keene Daingerfield back in the day. And my dad was with me, and we went into the room to talk to him, and he looked over at me, and he kind of said, I don't know if we're quite right. You look a little young. I think he thought maybe I was trying to, like some guys
Forge your ID.
forge your ID or whatever. But
Did your dad make this?
but anyway, so he wouldn't let me have my jockey's license that day, and I was obviously sick, sick to death. That I was like, oh my god, they're gonna not let me ride. And but anyway, luckily, because I'd been around and I'd actually been illegally, riding at River Downs, and actually had the guys at the gate and different people said, oh, the key, he's fine, he can ride, he's safe, and all that stuff. And so when I went back a week later, he gave me my license. So I went in on probably my birthday, or day after, and then a week later he gave me my license, and then like 4 or 5 days later I got to ride my first race on King of SWAT, who finished dead last or second last, I can't remember. But he at least had enough speed to get me in the race, and I got the feel of it all, the excitement of kind of being in the hunt, and until he got tired, and then we went out the back door. But it was at least it was a start, and it was great. Then I rode about 4 or 5 more races. My first race was at Churchill, and I rode 4 or 5 more races on horses that really had no chance. They were all 30 to 1 or 40 to 1 or 80 to 1, whatever.
I know.
And they finished mid pack, yeah, right. And so finally, my uncle gave me a call, and he said, "I've got a horse running at River Downs that I think's got a shot if you want to come riding." I said, "I'll be there." And that was my first winter, Red Pipe, and then I rode a winner for my mom the next day on a filly called Mary McCullough, and I rode a, and this is my only mount each day, and next day I won a race for a trainer called Dean Loring, and then from that point on I was getting offered 5 rides in every race, because I had the bug. I was, they're getting the bug, and
getting
I can actually guide a horse. They knew I could ride well enough to get them around, without. So, and then.
And was this mostly at River Downs?
This was all at River Downs, and within 2 months, I won 120 races.
Wow.
And then I went to Chicago for a couple 3 months, I guess. I rode at Arlington, and then Hawthorne briefly, and then came back for the fall meet at Churchill. And that's where I was riding with Eddie Delahousie and Don Brumfield. And at the end of that meet, I was trying to figure out where I was going to go. If I was going to go to Florida, which sounded nice,
nice and warm,
or go to New York, which is cold, but I, in my mind, always New York was, back then it was like, this is
where you want to be with the top jockeys,
right? Top jockeys and top horses, obviously the ones they filter down there for a little bit in the winter, but then the rest of the time they're in New York. So, and those guys said, this is a good time to break into New York because, all these guys are going to go south. Well, the winter I went up there, Cordero, Turcotte, Velasquez, they all stayed up there.
Oh, nice.
For whatever reason. I mean, they weren't riding, they were taking, taking mounts that they wanted, but
you got the leftover mounts.
I mean, once I got going, I was getting plenty of good mounts. It wasn't that, but same deal. I mean, I went in, and I won my first race, beating Cordero neck in the allowance, the allowance of the day,
that'll catch their attention.
And the next day I won a race on a horse. I can't remember the name of the horse, but it was and then the third day I went on like 100 to 1 or 90 to 1 shot, and so then bingo, I was same deal. I was back getting offered a lot of mounts because I still had the 5-pound bug, and that's pretty much all winter. I was doing that and riding against guys that I was learning a lot from every day. So it was cool.
And after riders lose their bug or weight allowance, which lasts a year, they often lose their momentum. Yet you got a Triple Crown mount. How did that happen?
Well, the weird thing is that year I won 487 races, and I was actually off for a month. So I probably could have given the record a little bit of competition if I'd been able to go. But I had and it was like opening day at Belmont, and that's when I had my first really bad fall, and I was they told me I would be out for 3 months. Well, a month from the day that I fell, I was back riding my first race, and I won my.
What was your injury?
Well, I broke my arm. I broke these two knuckles. Got crushed.
Mm-hmm.
A horse stepped on my foot or my hand there and severed the tendons in the back of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
I broke my arm, my ribs, and my collarbone.
Okay.
And I had about 50 stitches in my eyebrow from where the helmet had come
Wow.
down and
Yeah.
cut into my head. But, like when you're young, you can heal quicker, And I if I'd have done that now, I'd, be out for 10 years. But back then, when you're young and you're hungry and you your desire to get back. So, I rode back. And the first horse I rode back was a horse for Laz Barrera called Little Miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And the Little Miracle happened to be a half brother to Affirmed.
Oh,
which
wow.
is weird. He's by a horse called Little Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Yeah, the dam won't tell you it was a claimer.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere along the line, Mr. Wolfson had bought him and bred him to his stallion, and Affirmed arrived. And but anyway, I'd ridden Little Miracle for Laz, and so the first time I'd really ridden for him,
Mm-hmm.
and started our kind of situation where I was in. At some point, while I'd been hurt, Affirmed had run a guy called Gonzalez, a apprentice, had ridden him first time out. Then second time out, he ran in a stake, and Cordero won on him. And then he ran in another stake at Belmont, and that was when Alydar beat him, and he was second. And then they sent Affirmed to California, and Lafitte rode him, and he won the Hollywood Futurity. Back then, it was they changed the races all the time, but back then it was just a 2-year-old 6 furlong stake race. He won by 8. So those guys both had the mount ahead of me,
Mm-hmm.
but we got up to New York, to Belmont, or to Saratoga, and he was going to run in the Sanford, and I'm sure he was offered to Cordero, and Cordero thought he had a better horse called Tilt Up that Leroy Jolly had, and so he said, "I'm riding Tilt Up," and then I'm sure they also asked Lafitte, but he didn't want to. I mean, back then the Sanford was a $45,000 stake.
Okay.
And coming from California to get to Saratoga is not easy. It's a lot of different. So he decided.
Passed it up.
So none of them really knew how good the firm was. I don't think anybody did. They knew he was a nice little horse, but not a Triple Crown
Mm-hmm.
potential horse or a Derby horse or any of that. So anyway, I got the mount and I rode him and I won on him. And the first time I won on him, I knew he was a nice horse, but again, I wasn't like thinking, no, this is the best thing I've ever seen or sat on. But then whatever it was, 3 or 4 weeks later, when he ran in the Hopeful against Alydar, that was the day I knew I found
This was
this
the horse.
special horse, because we in the Hopeful, they hooked up at the head of the lane, and it was like 2 rocket ships taking off.
They're moving up on the outside with Alydar, approaching the 16th pole, Affirmed and Alydar. Affirmed along the inside, Alydar on the outside at the wire, it's Affirmed in front.
What a feeling.
It really was a great feeling, just, they left there, and there was other good horses in the race. I think Believe It was kind of like always the third best horse.
Mm-hmm.
He was always
Poor Believe It.
in the dirt,
Born the wrong year.
in the Preakness,
Uh-huh.
He was, I think he was third in the Hopeful that year, maybe, as a 2-year-old, and so there was a lot of good horses around, and but these two, they were just that much better,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the start of the rivalry kind of started, but that was when people really realized this is a serious rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it was a great thing to be involved with.
Yeah. And at 18 to be going through the Triple Crown, were you worried about losing the mount from the Kentucky Derby to the Preakness to the Belmont?
I was worried probably about it more before the Triple Crown because I actually had gotten suspended, and I misriding him in the Santa Anita Derby, and Lafitte rode him, and he won on him by easy. But they put me right back on him for the Hollywood Derby, which was back then a dirt race that came up, and so I rode him and won on him, so I knew I was right. Mr. Wolfson and Mrs. Wolfson were great in that way. They gave me a lot of confidence that they had confidence in me. But when you're young and you're always these other guys are good and more experienced, particularly in the big races.
Yeah.
I always was a little concerned beforehand, but not that. I mean, it's like I was when I got to the Derby, I was just glad to be there, have a shot to ride a horse that had a chance. And then once we won, I'll tell you a funny story because. So we won the Derby, and we were at the reception that night with the Wolfsons, and Mr. Wolfson was standing there. My little brother Kerry was standing there. He was 9 years old at the time, and he'd always kind of hang around Mr. Wolfson, and look out, with big eye listening to him, and Mr. Wolfson always pat him on the head and give him a few bucks, here and there.
Nice.
And he said, "We sure are proud of your brother, Kerry. He really rode a great race for us today." And Kerry looked up at him. He said, "Mr. Wilson, anybody could have won on your horse today."
Said, Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks a lot, bro.
You're not going to be my age.
But anyway, now the Wilsons always, that was a great thing. It's
really loyal.
Yeah, very loyal. Very, Mr. Wolfson particularly. I think he knew how to inspire people and get people, motivated. And
right, because the horse is going to feel that confidence. So I always know whether it's the trainer or the owner has confidence in me. Like riding for you.
Yeah, right.
It's just so much easier to go out there and give your best shot. And if it's not the horse's day, you're not going to be blamed for it.
Exactly. So, I went into the Derby, obviously full of hope, and I wasn't worried about anything, but. And then, and really the Preakness the same, it's like, I knew because, it wasn't like, if Alydar beat me, it wasn't like, nobody in the world was expecting, he was a good horse. He was a great horse,
He was the favorite in each stage.
He was a favorite in the Derby. He wasn't, we were the favorite in the Preakness and the favorite in the Belmont, but probably the favorite in the Preakness because it was a short, most people figured Alydar needed further, not shorter, because, he obviously was kind of a one-run horse, and, but anyway, he kept getting closer every time, he's like, they did like a 109 workout with him, right before the Preakness, and so we knew what they were, we're coming out,
rolling.
We're going to be getting up there chasing you sooner than we were last time, so, and they did, and, but the Preakness, I was very, I always felt like we had him, and, I was waiting for him, and when we hooked up and picked up like we had again in the Hopeful, I just thought, I got you, I knew, I just knew we had enough. In the Belmont, it was a little different because, again, it's a mile and a half, first time any of these horses have gone that far, and, when we got to the quarter pole, I knew we were going to have to dig deep because Alydar was right there, and I could feel a little bit of fatigue in my horse, but, and that's when I hit him left-handed for the first time I'd ever hit him left-handed, and, he just found that enough to get his head back in front and hold him off to the line.
Affirmed under a left-hand whip. Alydar on the outside driving. Affirmed and Alydar heads apart. Affirmed's got a nose in front as they come onto the wire.
But I always knew I could count on Affirmed. It's like it's kind of like
you establish that trust.
Go to the bank.
Horse and rider.
Like you can go to the bank on a horse like him because you just know the only way he's not going to give it to you is if he hadn't got it. So the Belmont, I will say, at the end of that race, that he had given literally everything he had, because you can see in the picture in the winning circle, I mean, they got the carnations over his head, and he's like, his head's like,
it's drooping. I'm exhausted.
Like, he had definitely, laid it all out on the line that day.
What was that feeling crossing the wire first in the Belmont?
Well, it was amazing simply because I knew I couldn't make any mistakes, and luckily I didn't. And I knew that the horse had to give me everything, and luckily he did. And we won by that much.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like the perfect race.
Yeah. And you won the English Fillies Triple Crown as well.
I did, on a really great filly. I would consider her the equivalent of Affirmed, the female equivalent. She was just kind of that all around, she could run at any distance. She was game. She wanted to win. And she beat Colts in the Ledger and ran against Colts a couple other times. She should have really been undefeated, really, to be quite honest. She got beaten to King George, and that was on rock hard ground. As time went on, we realized, that I won the guineas on her on firm ground, and just got up the last few strides. But part of it was because she was hating the firm ground. It didn't. She'd never really run on it that much before, so didn't know. But then at that time, I was just thinking maybe the distance is too short. But what really was the ground was too firm. And then in the King George, it was the middle. It's the middle of summer. I mean, the ground was probably like the highway. It's that hard. So, and not only that, a couple things that the horse. I was just coming up to the head of the stretch, and I just got lapped on the horse that had been in front, and I was obviously going to wait another furlong or so and then kick. Well, at the head of the stretch, the head of the stretch there is like almost 3 furlongs out.
Yeah.
This horse bolted to the outside fence, which I was already lapping. So then I had to kick on sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I got to the front, and then of course that last part up the hill.
She's getting tired.
Just hating the ground. It kind of like started climbing, and and this horse just came and beat me half a length. And then in the other time she got beat was in the bottomless ground, in an older horse that had won the St. Ledger, out, just kind of out plowed through the ground better than she did. But, she was really a special filly. And actually, the neat thing was I got to end up riding a filly out of her that I won a grade 1 on called Rosefinch, which was cool. So, like...
I like riding family
horse. Yeah, like, especially when they, turn out to be
like their
somewhat
sibling.
like their mom, or if you've ridden a sire that like there's a kind of, you realize that horse has passed on
the traits,
some of the traits and genetics and whatever talent. But she was a great filly. So that was and it hadn't been done since over there. I mean, obviously since there's been 2 Triple Crown winners here since Firm did it, but over she was the last filly to do it in '85, and I think the last horse to do it was Nijinsky in 1967, something like that. So that hadn't been done. A horse hadn't won the Triple Crown since '67 in England.
And having won the U.S. Triple Crown and the English Triple Crown shows your consistency and ability to thrive under pressure. And I like the quote that champions interpret pressure as excitement. How did you do that?
I just tried not to make anything bigger than it had to be. I went into the Derby thinking this is just another race, which it really is. I don't want to try to overthink it or I tried to play down, the enormity of what it really is. And that's kind of how I went through, tried to downplay stuff, make it not get overwhelming. And, and all that's pretty much it. Just not make something bigger than it really needs to be.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't become your typical teenage success star. You remained humble. I've watched a lot of your interviews through the Triple Crown at 18.
I'm just a regular guy. I don't like to be treated any different.
And your reputation is great. How did you stay grounded with early success?
my parents were great. I think a lot of all my success, came from my family, my parents, particularly my dad. But my mom too. She gave me a lot of my competitiveness and my athleticism, because she was a really great athlete. She was really good at anything she did. They kept my feet on the ground. Just kind of, my dad constantly remembered, don't forget the road up, the people you pass on the way up, you're going to pass them on the way down too. So be nice to them.
That's good advice from Dad.
So anyway.
You've told me before, the harder you worked, the luckier you got. I'm sure people around you just talked about having luck, but clearly you were dedicated, skipping out on hanging out with friends and working out in your hay bale. And
it's I think that's what's really worked for, as you say, staying focused and, realizing that nothing's easy that's, worth doing. You have to put in the effort. And I was willing to do it, and then some if I could, just whatever. I wanted to be good and then be better. Good. So, but it's, and of course, having been around a lot of successful people, whether they're sports stars or business people or whatever, I kind of find that happens a lot with those kind of people. That they're willing to go the extra mile, do what it takes to kind of get there. And then like you said, then you kind of got to also realize too that at the same time, keep it in perspective that there's world wars going on or people starving in Africa, whatever. We're riding horses. It's important to us, but it's not in the grand scheme of things. So if you get beat in a race that you maybe should have even won, it's not gonna change.
That's really good perspective. It's very easy to get jockey tunnel vision.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And I try to kind of be real.
I read your book, The Kid, and it talked about your agent, Lenny Goodman. Something that stuck out to me was talked about he wouldn't spin trainers at the draw to ride a better horse.
Right.
Yet he focused on the long-term loyalty, building up that trust and relationships. It's definitely not the common approach to racing. And being his jockey and being in high demand and knowing he was turning down sometimes what would be the winner in the race, was that ever hard for you? Were you guys on the same mindset?
Yeah. No, I mean, I left him do his job and I did mine. I told him what I thought were the better horses, when I was riding them, and he'd say, we got a shot to ride this or that, what do you think? And I'd tell him what I think. And sometimes he would still not do what I told him because he thought it was more important to take care of that trainer who had what I didn't think was the best horse. Sometimes I'd still win on them,
I bet.
Not because they were the best, just
but you got the most right.
Maybe I got it wrong, I probably got it wrong. But, it's, I never minded that because, again, that was kind of down to my dad, kind of my dad's teachings of, treat people the way you want to be treated. And, spinning people at the last second was not, what I wanted to do, either. Like you said, it was more important for me to keep the guys that were giving me really good mounts day in, day out than, for one particular race or whatever. So, I never minded that. The only time is I could have actually ridden Spectacular Bid.
Oh.
And for some reason, he chose to.
Well, Lenny
messed that one up. Anyway, God forgive you, Lenny.
That's right. What was it like to win the Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year over Muhammad Ali and Reggie Jackson?
Well, at the time, I was winning so many awards, I didn't know what, and at first...
what the significance was.
To be quite honest, I wasn't...
Who's Muhammad Ali?
Well, no, I knew that. I knew who that was, but I didn't, Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year, I didn't know that was that big of a deal or what it really was at the time, probably at first, anyway. But I thought, this is cool. Muhammad Ali, and Reggie Jackson, because Reggie was up there playing for the Yankees and winning, hitting home runs and being a star on, we'd see him. He was in the papers almost as much as I was.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, the funny story. About years later, I was up in Baltimore at a card signing thing, and I ran into, it was a huge place, and there was football, basketball, all kinds of stuff. They had World Series trophies and every kind of memorabilia thing that you could ever have. And when I got done signing my cards that I was signing, I was walking around, looking around, and I saw Reggie Jackson. So I'd never met the guy, and I thought, well, I'm gonna go say hi to this, say hi. And so I said, Mr. Jackson, how you doing? And he said, oh, how you doing? I said, I'm Steve Cauthen. I said, I used to be in New York when you were, hitting all the home runs for the Yanks. And he was real nice, and we were just chatting, kind of real friendly like. And then all of a sudden, he said, a basketball player came by, and he said, come over here. I want you to meet this guy, and as I wasn't a kid anymore, but he said, this is Steve Cauthen. And he said, I had 2 chances to be Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year. He said, one time I got beat by a horse, Secretariat, and the other time this little punk beat me. So he said, I'm not sure if I like racing. But anyway, it was just a funny thing that happened, and funny that he even remembered it back that 30-something years later. But anyway, it was cool. I mean, obviously I think I'm the only jockey that's ever won that. So
Wow. I believe that's right.
Doesn't really happen. Like you said, racing doesn't very often get its due. Always recognized, and it's probably less recognized now than it was back then. But so it was cool. It was fun, and I had since met Muhammad Ali, and you realize how big these guys really are. How well known they are worldwide, and he was inspirational in many ways. I think he inspired a lot of people, young guys that are looking for what to do, and get into boxing or whatever, and just trying to kind of in his way guide people the right direction.
Mm-hmm. To me, a true sports hero is someone who has gone through a major setback, had the press and the fans in their face, had your backers, trainers, people you were winning for before, turn their back on you.
Mm-hmm.
You went through a major drought. It's really inspired me in my career. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in 1978, literally a month and a half or so after I won the Triple Crown, I had a bad fall up in Saratoga where I injured my knee. I had a little chip, little fracture under my kneecap, but it caused
a lot of pain.
A lot of pain and a lot of headaches for me because you can't ride as a jockey. Your knee is
pretty
very
important.
I mean, so I was out, and I missed riding Affirmed in the Travers Stakes for start, and so I was trying to do everything I could to get back, and probably rushed it, because I healed so quick. That first time.
Yeah, the first time that was a lot of broken bones. This is just a little chip.
This is a little chip. Yeah. So, but it obviously, so I did obviously everything that I was supposed to do, but I still probably pushed myself to get back quicker than I should have, and because I wanted to ride Affirmed, and he was going to run against Seattle Slew in the Marlboro, and then he had obviously we wanted to be a horse of the year again, or horse of the year for the first time. He was 2-year-old champion as a 2-year-old, then he was horse of the year 3 and 4. I rushed myself to try to get back to ride him, and all of a sudden nobody. It was kind of strange because Laz, I was thinking he'll be dying for me to get back up. Well, he wasn't right quite as hungry to get me back as I thought he should be. But anyway, So anyway, I got off to a slow start. This was still in New York, and then we went to California. Well, California, New York was, had been my base.
Mm-hmm.
California, I was just out there the winter before, and I'd done great the winter before. I won, 85, 90 races, and I was leading rider most of the meet.
Mm-hmm.
And Pinkai just came and beat me at the end, by 3 or 4 races. But I went out this time, and like you would have thought I had, the plague. I mean, I was riding for Laz, what we had, but the horses just kind of weren't really in great form yet. Whatever. It's
Right.
they.
It's year-round sport.
It's right. Nothing was quite clicking. They're all running okay. They just weren't quite clicking, and literally I couldn't get a good mount from anybody else. I mean, like I was riding 40, 50 to 1 shots for all the other trainers that would even bother to give me a mount. So. I mean, like and then you lose your confidence. I mean, I don't care who you are and how great you've done or been. It's easy enough to start scratching your head like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Right.
And I'm not sure that I was really doing anything that much wrong. Just but when you lose your confidence, when you do actually have the halfway decent amount, you probably you do maybe move a little bit quicker, or not as quick as you would you normally
Not
do.
quite as cool.
You just don't. You're not as as geared into everything as you, and So I went to 110 races without a winner, which is a long. Even though it's probably all happened over 3.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I was riding, still riding 7 or 8 races a day.
And the press was taking advantage.
And the press were killing me, and
like
guys,
headlines coming out about this pretty often, right? They're just putting out headlines about your stats.
It was the biggest thing, I mean, like I said, well, that's what sells papers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that's we built him up on the way up. Now we're gonna. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
it felt like they were literally, like sticking knives in me coming down. Like
Yeah.
And but what was really hurtful is guys that I'd ridden for won. Like I won the Triple Crown. It's like that you just you really didn't feel like you had their confidence, or that they were really trying to, that they were worrying about you too much. Like oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can not use them? And but anyway, it worked through it, and I finally ended up winning a race after 110 races on Father Duffy, which was one of Aaron Jones's horses, and that's when Sangster, Mr. Sangster, came and offered me the job to go to Europe, because he realized he actually asked me to come ride Hawaiian Sound in the Derby, the Epsom Derby, but it was coincided with the Belmont Stakes, and that's why I didn't go, because I didn't want to take a chance on getting jet lagged or anything. But at this time, it was like, hey, I thought, what have I got to lose? And then the other point that he made when we were having dinner one night was, Steve, you're probably going to end up needing to come to Europe in the end anyway because of your weight.
Mm-hmm.
And when I really sat down and thought about it, I realized he was right. It's like, my weight's, I can still do what, one.
Yeah. What did you have to ride at back then? It was even lighter.
Well, I mean, I could ride it whatever back then.
But what were the general weights?
But, like, I mean, a guy.
100, 110.
No, I mean, a guy that could still ride at 115 could do okay.
Okay.
But you couldn't really do much more than that. If you couldn't ride at 115 every day, all day long, you were going to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't there yet, but
you're growing.
Where I was heading, and I kept growing until I was 21.
How tall did you end up being?
I am 5'5".
Okay, I'm 5'4".
And I was 5'1" when I started.
Right.
At 16.
It's a growth spurt, yeah.
So, anyway, I realized he was right, and that's what in the end made me say, what the heck, and it was a great decision for me because I rode for 17 years. If I'd have stayed here, I doubt I would have been able to ride more than 6 or 7 or 8. Because I would have, without killing myself, because I've literally, I ended up not being able to over there at the end. I could ride at 120, but I didn't even have to do that most of the time. It was just during the big meets.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time, all I was doing 123, 126.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it kept me going a lot longer than I would have been able to do it here, I think.
Yeah. What is it about your riding style or your connection to a horse that you think set you apart from other jockeys?
I had a connection with my hands. I had good hands, and like you said, I think I thought like a horse. I was trying to get a horse to want to do what I wanted him to do. Most of the time, every once in a while I get pissed off at one,
Uh-huh.
but
They teach us patience.
yeah. But mainly I was, trying to encourage horses to, want to do what I wanted them to do, and yeah, I don't know, I think one of my benefits, I did have a good, idea of time,
Mm-hmm.
how fast horses were going, so I think that was a big factor in my success. But my getting along with horses and getting horses to run for me, and there's some guys that horses run for, and some guys that horses don't run for,
Mm-hmm.
or as well. Not consistently. Most horses ran for me. A few types that didn't get along with as well, but I could
Mm-hmm.
handle most kind. But there's different guys that horses run for, and that some don't. Horses run for you. Horses break well for you. There's certain things that you do, that and I don't,
It's hard to put a
everybody's
finger on
different.
what
Yeah,
it
right. I
is.
mean,
Yeah.
you do it. I mean, I'm sure, you do, getting horses out of the gate, is important, but it's, you know,
Not something I
everybody,
really try to do. Just
everybody does it different.
happens. Yeah.
Maybe it's because you're relaxed. I don't, more relaxed than some people. I don't know what it is. I just know that, horses break great for you, and, they're usually, that gives them a chance to be in a
Mm-hmm.
good position early, and that's important. For me, just you do different things that work for you, and it's different for everybody. Like you said, you try to do stuff that you see works for other people,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it works for you, and some doesn't, and you just everybody's kind of got their own little things that work and they use.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you really love horses. I think some jockeys are great athletes and they approach it more like a sport. Others seem to really be horsemen,
Mhm.
love the horse. There's several quotes in the Kentucky Derby Racing Museum,
Yeah.
and I like yours that says, to be involved with a great racehorse is a special blessing. And that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
What is that like?
Well, it's not only though it was obviously a horse like Affirmed. It was great, but it was also the team. The whole thing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's always a team.
Yeah.
You don't.
it is.
Everybody. You
Without the preparation of the horse.
people. I don't care what you do, but nobody does anything by themselves. They
Mhm.
don't get there by themselves. They don't stay there by themselves. You got to have people and other individuals. Like when I think of the well-oiled machine that was the Affirm team back in the day. We had a great trainer. We had some great owners that allowed us all to feel comfortable about what we
Mm-hmm. Give you really that
give us
backing and loyalty.
the backing, the loyalty, and the free reign to do what we thought was right. We had great people working in the stable.
Mm-hmm.
Toto, the kid, I think he might still be galloping horses somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Was just a great exercise rider. He rode him more than I. I'd only ride the odd bit of work. He ended up because it was work. He knew the horse and he knew what to do. He did most of the work, except maybe if Laz wanted something specific to do, to be done that he knew be better for me to try to do. His Juan, his groom,
Mm-hmm.
that like literally slept in the
Yeah.
barn with him and in the stall if he had to.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a great team to accomplish great things, and we had a great team with a great horse. The bottom line is you got to have the great horse to
Right.
start with, but if you got a great team surrounding them, then you can do some amazing things. And when I look at the Secretariat team, or even the Seattle Slew team, and
Yeah.
they all had great great teams, and
Yeah. It's not all that.
cool to be involved with, because it's even though you're just a part of it, it's
Yeah.
everybody has to play their part and do it to perfection, really, to make it all work. Like it's
Mhm.
like it does when you win the Triple Crown.
Yeah. And I think it's more meaningful when
Yeah.
you are
Yeah,
connected to all the people
it's winning
and
stuff
you
by
realize it's beyond yourself.
If you win stuff by yourself, it's kind of gets
Yeah.
lonely.
Mhm. Right.
You got to share stuff, and it makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah. Great athletes talk about getting into a flow state. I
Mhm.
believe getting into a flow state with a racehorse takes that to another level. Your riding reminds me very much of that. Can you describe what that feels like?
Yeah, I mean, when you're really in tune, when you're really fit and you're, in the zone, as you say, everything happens slower. It's like split second things. Your mind has enough time to casually make a decision, like I
Mm-hmm.
need to go inside or, make a decision about what to do in a race. And yeah, it's when you're kind of in the zone, it's really cool. And, you're in the zone with the motion of the horse and, you know, really the best thing you can ever do to, with a horse is not get in his way.
Mm-hmm.
Not, a lot of, there's whipping and all this stuff. It looks good, but it's, it never,
Is the balance point really?
balance and keeping in rhythm and keeping, as long as the horse is running, I mean, some
Mhm.
horses you got to wake them
Wake
up
'em
and
up
get
or
them
mate
going.
'em.
But if a horse is running for you, the biggest thing you can do is not get in his way, not get him unbalanced. And, so yeah, it's a cool thing. It's poetry in motion, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful thing and that's one of the things that captures people's imagination is when they see all the colors and the beauty and the balance and the competition, the
Mm-hmm.
horses competing. I mean, I think people really get a lot out of watching what they want to be come out in a horse, like a horse really fighting out a finish. And, it's
And a great
it's
horse.
all the things that you wish you were.
Yeah, when a horse knows
Yeah.
that it's won or
Yeah.
lost,
Yeah.
people are always shocked when I tell
Yeah.
them that.
Yeah. So champions are champions. It's great to see something special, and that horses like Affirmed, or just you know something you want to you never get enough of them. And he was a great personality as well. He was a really
Really?
intelligent horse that
Mm-hmm.
um, he was just fun to be around.
Yeah.
Because you could just see that he knew what was going on. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, he really, he knows that we're all sitting here admiring him,
Mm-hmm.
and he likes it.
Yeah. I find that too. Some horses are
Yeah.
photogenic. They love the camera.
Yep.
Yeah. They have great personalities.
So,
And when you moved to Europe,
Mhm.
they said your riding style was very unique. You were still and low. European riders have they move a lot more in the saddle. And you were also confident to put a horse on the lead.
Mhm.
And they more often like to tuck in
Yeah.
and come off the pace. How, being a newcomer there, did you stick with your gut and just go with what you knew was right?
Because I didn't know what else, I mean, again, I was lucky. I was with a guy, Barry Hills, who I first went to ride for, who I could, immediately kind of had faith in me, and I knew how he wanted his horses ridden generally, but he was open to letting me, do what I thought was right. And obviously right off the bat, I won the guineas for him on a long shot, and I won a couple races from the front. And Hawaiian Sound, the horse that I originally really kind of was brought over to ride, was kind of a front running horse. So.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So you let the horse
so
tell you.
once I realized that you could ride that way, you just had to pace the horse, allowing for uphill finishes. These there's the tracks are different, but generally, if you if you get a horse relaxed and and you know how fast you're going, you know how fast a horse can run in a race. You got to
Mhm.
just gotta have enough to outfinish them up the hill, from the front or wherever you're at. If you're
Mhm.
coming from behind, you got to have more than that because you got to pass them and, make up that ground and then still get past them. So, I didn't mind. I mean, I liked riding from front and behind. That wasn't so much, but it's all kind of just judging pace and kind of knowing where you're at and how far you got to go and how much horse you got left.
Mm-hmm. After retiring from riding, you've stayed involved in horse racing and the whole thoroughbreds lifestyle. You breed your own. You're the first one on their back to train them under saddle, right?
I haven't done that for a while. About 4 years ago was my last ones that I broke, and that all went well. I broke them, and that was all fine. And then I came out here to get on, and I jumped on one of them that was with Kellen Gordon. It dumped me, and I basically got a compressed fracture in my back from just falling off and landing on my butt. And I thought, this probably isn't worth it anymore because I'm getting too old. I'm not going to heal as quick as I used to. So I've kind of given up on riding. I mean, not I could jump on a horse and ride, but trying to break young horses is probably not really too smart for a guy that's as old as me.
Yeah.
The bones ain't healing as quick as they used to.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I think it's great that you're still so involved. And
yeah, I like it. I mean, I love being involved with like Dixiana, where I help with their racing stable, and I get to see the jockeys and talk to Red Ortiz and Luis Saez and these guys that basically they're doing what I did, and kind of relating it to now, and it's kind of what I know. It's like kind of makes me feel like I'm a part of it again. Because when you retire, you're on the outside again. It's like you're not in the middle of it all.
Right.
Unless you do something. Once I started, I never really quite realized that until I started doing it again, and how much I enjoy kind of still playing the game and being involved and knowing how everybody thinks and what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've been a great mentor to me, so we appreciate.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, having someone who's seen it all.
Well, like I said, happy to like you said, that's all I got to do is try to pass on what little stuff I do know. So
yeah, little stuff.
Yeah.
If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you have told yourself?
I think things kind of happen like they're supposed to. It's like I don't know. I mean, I think you have bad run. Things are put in your way to teach you stuff, and as it turned out, my bad streak probably was a blessing. In disguise. I didn't see it that way at the time. Yeah, a door shuts, a window opens. It's and that, I tried to see it that way as best I could, but it's hard to see it till till you go through it and live it, and then like even like you said, the things that kind of I felt like were hurting me from the way people acted, it just made me understand people.
Yeah.
And so,
I also think it's made you incredibly loyal.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you're right because like you say, I don't. It didn't feel good, and I don't think it's a great way to treat people. But I think I understand it because it's business. It's like I mean I understood even why it happened. In certain ways, it's those kind of stories sell papers. That's why the guys write them. The guy maybe didn't want to be doing it, but he did it because that's how he made his money. But it still hurts at the time because you know that you've gone out of your way to help these guys. When they were asking you for help, they needed a story or whatever, and so But it's all those things. I think are like you said, they happen the way they were meant to happen.
Right. Without adversity, we won't grow.
Yeah.
We never want it.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's scary to grow.
Yes, it is.
So
I'll close with one final question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone just starting their career?
I'm not talking about jockeyship or anything in life. I think just the biggest thing is to surround yourself with good people. I think it's it's not always easy to do, but you got to try to find the good people because good people will help you without expecting something in return. And that's I think good people want to pass on what their knowledge. It's you say it's like you realize how blessed you've been. You want to share, your blessings with somebody else who
Mm-hmm.
has decided to do something that you understand, and
Yeah.
try to help them. But yeah, it's I was blessed. I realize this now. I mean, as I was going through life, I thought it was all me, but
Mm-hmm.
but I realized how lucky I was. The people that kind of were in my path. From my family, from to the early days living with Chuck Talafero and his wife. Having that blessing of being in New York, but having a family atmosphere around
Yeah.
me instead of
Just
Yeah.
living in an apartment by yourself.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just
Lonely.
things that, where I could have gotten a lot more trouble pretty easy.
Yeah. Being a jockey is a lonely path.
Yeah,
A lot of travel.
it is. It's, and it's, so yeah, I mean, so I just think, and having good parents, they tried to put me in the path of good people, and they did. And then I, luckily along the way, started realizing this is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Stick with the good people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good talking to you.
You too.
And now for a moment from our next episode, airing January 30th with Patti Cooksey.
And I know you were the second female in history to ride in the Kentucky Derby. Can you describe a bit what that experience was like?
It was like a sound barrier. The people and the audience screaming so loud that you hit this like sound barrier. It felt like that's the wall.
Boundless is a podcast that explores the stories of individuals who have accomplished the seemingly impossible by breaking molds and redefining success through unique challenges, pivotal moments, and unbreakable determination.